Hi, Luivette. I'm so excited to have you as one of our rotating hosts. We are, along with Lynn, all three of us are going to be carrying the torch that Mariano is passing down to us. So it's so excited to have you here.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
First of all, I just like after reading your collection, there's like such a kinship that I felt, and I think that the kinship is the fact that you are putting so much of like these multicultural, a very diverse background, and trying to find yourself within that, and I understand that so much, and it's also locational. It's not just cultural, as in like okay. You're from Puerto Rico. You were born in Aguas Buenas.
Yes.
Yeah, and then you are raised in the Bronx. It's not just the different country either. It's like also because now you live in San Gabriel Valley, which is where I actually went to high school. And you teach there as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I do.
Yeah, and it's also the move from east and west and like the differences that you also see there. So when I say culture, it's like it's a lot of location, you know, and it makes whenever you actually say something about your life and your poetry that's very specific, that may be foreign to me, but I also see like the way that you're reckoning with it that's very familiar in what I'm trying to do in my work too, and I really love that. I mean, do you write about your identity a lot?
I do. And it's not always intentional. Like I don't always go in saying, okay, I'm going to write about my identity. And I've been thinking about this quite often because I believe my identity has changed over the last few years. And I just mentioned this actually to my students the other day. I said, when I was in college, I, for example, had no intention of being a parent, right? Never had that in my vision board before we even had vision boards. I thought I was just going to be a lawyer and work and have long hours, and that was kind of the vision I had for myself. And now I'm a mom of 3 kids, and I can't imagine not being a parent and not being a mother to these 3 wonderful human beings. And so identity, I think for me, is constantly changing, and I think I'm always trying to reconcile what is my new identity. And now getting older and the kids are getting older and moving out, it's like, okay, my identity is changing again, and then how do I reconcile with that, and how do I feel about that? And I see those emotions coming through in the poetry.
That is actually one of my favorite poems because what you just said, it's the poem for the man who asked me, where are your motherhood poems? Yeah.
That actually was a true story. Was at a poetry reading, Q&A with Chiwan, who was my pressmate with the Chucha, and this was like years ago. And there was a gentleman, we were at a college, and a gentleman in the audience said, where are your motherhood poems? You say you have children, but where are your motherhood poems? And Chiwan and I looked at each other, and he was really shocked by that, because he said, well, no one's asking me where are my fatherhood poems and things like that, but yet you're really, just funneling that particular question to her. And I was just really shocked by that. And at the time I wasn't writing about my kids, and I sat with that moment for a while, and then eventually I wrote that poem because that would have been my response. I said, what did you want me to say? Yeah. And so that's where that poem came from. Yeah.
The particular way that like all of these like background, like the diversity of the background, help you come up with almost like your own language, right? Like, means sometimes it's called Spanglish, but also there are like certain cultural or like landscape markers like bodega, right? Bodega that doesn't actually exist in like California, let's say.
When I first started writing poetry, I think for example, I would italicize the Spanish words, to make them stand out. I don't do that anymore. Unless I want to emphasize a word, any word, I'll italicize, for example, but now I don't do that anymore. I'm leaning towards more of being more comfortable with my languages, and that's plural, because it's not just the Spanish and the English, but also growing up in New York, right? We have our own, New Yorkers have their own language, right? And I just don't feel like I need to over-explain myself, and I think I'm just feeling really more and more comfortable, right? Just feeling like this is who I am.
On that note I really want you to read All Day, Every Day, if you can.
Yes.
Because I really do feel this poem is such an amalgam of like everything that makes you wonderful.
So
Yeah.
All Day, Every Day, I wrote this during the pandemic, and there was a grifter, shall we say, at that time. I don't want to mention her name, and who was finally outed for basically taking on the identity of a Puerto Rican scholar.
Oh no.
So it came to be that this woman who had received funding for years, she actually was teaching at a university, she had gotten all these fellowships under the identity supposedly that she was this Puerto Rican Caribbean woman living in the Bronx. And then come to find out that she actually was not from any of those spaces. That's not who she really was. She was a white woman from a different space, but here she had taken on this identity. And it was, and she had, she was outed for it, and I was appalled. And then I did more research on her, and I looked at her videos online where she was intentionally answering questions of what she believed a Puerto Rican woman would sound like. It was almost like a caricature. And the more research I did, the more, should I say, the angrier I got. And so this is where this comes from. So this is why I wrote this poem. The Bronx isn't a resume builder. You don't get a Scouts badge because you lived there today or 20 years ago. You don't come from the Bronx comes from you. And you don't survive the Bronx. It isn't trying to kill you so you can justify leaving it behind, abandoning it like one of the buildings from the 80s with painted flower pots on the windows, making them more aesthetically pleasing for the Jersey commuters as they crawl on the Cross Bronx Expressway, which is always under construction. The Bronx is more than switching your T's for D's when you say water. The accent isn't part of your audition for the next Spike Lee movie. The Bronx is more than dancing to hip-hop and bomba. It's Lisa Lisa in the Cult Jam and TKA in the community center basement at your cousin's Sweet 16. It's having enough spray cans and D batteries. The Bronx is the way your head tilts when someone says something suspicious. It is in the amount of yos and dead asses used in a story because yo, I am dead ass when I tell you that shit happened like I said it did, but in the end, we good. The Bronx is the original Yankee Stadium and hating on the Mets in perpetuity. It is witnessing love triangles at the park unravel like a telenovela. The Bronx is the ineptitude of the 2 train and cursing Robert Moses when you surface. The Bronx is knowing bodega aisles like treasure maps. It is getting ready for a night out, searching for your favorite hoop earrings and Boricua red lipstick. It means rolling without hesitation when your comadre hits you up. The Bronx is sitting at a faculty meeting and asking the questions no one is willing to ask because in the BX, there is no sugarcoating. We're not all Jennifer Lopez's, you know. We're not, and that's become kind of like what some people believe. That's their only version of a Puerto Rican. You know, also I get the question of like, oh, you're from the Bronx, like, oh, you must have like, true. This is people telling me, oh, you must have a shank in your bun, or you must have razor blades. I mean, like, it's like the connection to like, yeah. Where are you getting these ideas, you know, about, you know, people from the Bronx or Puerto Ricans from the Bronx? It's just fascinating to me. And it's just, yeah, and that stuff just makes it into the poetry. Now we have like AOC, and which I'm writing a poem about that too right now, because again, I think she's amazing, but it's like, you know, there's more to us. There's more of us, and we all come in different. We're all in different spaces, and we all sound differently, and our experiences with Puerto Rico and language and music and food is so different. And so it's really important to me that that's probably the sensibility that I'm thinking of when I write. It's like that I want to respect the fact that we're not all this one thing. Most of the stuff I write about is coming from a personal story. Obviously, you know, I definitely have that poetic license, or it's a story that someone has shared with me and has given me the permission to write about, right? And so that's also been the case. But it's really important to me that as a Puerto Rican poet, like, again, we don't hear enough about Puerto Rican poetry in this world either. And so I find it an honor. It's part of my identity. It's part of when people ask me, like, how do you identify? I say I'm Boricua, I'm Puerto Rican. That's more than not, it's the first thing that I say. And then I'll say, oh, I'm from the Bronx, or I'm a mom, I'm a teacher. these identities that evolve and change. Like I said, once upon a time, I identified this way. Now I'm identifying now as a mother of 3, and I'm very conscious that some identities are going to stay the way. I'm Puerto Rican from the Bronx. That's never going to change. But there's other identities that I'll add to my resume or the way that I see myself. But I think at the end of the day, our identities as writers of color is political.
I have a personal favorite, and this is the one that you promised to me, so I would love for you to read it.
A letter to Gus, the judgmental CVS clerk. Dear Gus, I didn't need the extra look of judgment or the 5-page receipt when I bought my Plan B pill. Yes, I had sex. No, I didn't use a condom. Yes, I enjoyed it. And yes, Gus, I will do it again, again, and again. I don't think male customers get the same discernment when they buy the industrial pack of Trojans, extra thin and lubricated for her pleasure. I am tired of my body being examined and decided upon by men who couldn't find a clitoris, even if Alexa, Siri, and Google joined forces in some GPS version of Voltron. So save your visual admonishments, for I am not your Latin Mary Magdalene, although I am sure I did shout God's name more than once. You will not side-eye me for fulfilling my sexual desires, expressing my sensuality, savoring the taste of a man's touch, satisfying my fantasies one orgasm at a time, loving my body under my own terms, sincerely an unapologetic woman.
I love that. And I love that because like you're, turning an experience, a potentially negative experience on its head by taking control of the narrative.
Right.
And I find that to be very powerful. And on top of it, there was, of course, a lot of humor in it. But the humor also, every one of them felt true. Like I said, was coming from like a place of like, listen, all of these things, like I'm just going to say it back to you. But like these are not exaggerations even. Yeah.
No, unfortunately, none of that was at all untrue. Everything happened exactly how it is in the poem. And it... I'm just remembering, like, when I was in graduate school, my teacher, my mentor, Martina Espada, told me, take it to the page when you're angry, right? Like, write about it. And that's a really good way to just, not only is it therapeutic, but you get to immortalize people's ignorance. And I like the way he said that to me one time, and I don't think even he remembers me saying that to me in his office, but I really take that to heart anytime that I have incidences like this, where I'm like, no, I'm gonna write about it. And I'm gonna let people know about this ridiculous thing that happened, especially as we're still having the conversation of women being allowed autonomy of their own bodies.
As a person of color, like sometimes like I do get also asked my favorite question, why don't I write about trauma more, right? And
oh my God, wow.
I don't know if you get asked that. Like
That's
I didn't.
so wild. Go ahead, sorry.
No. I mean, but like and
It's so wild.
And there's something about your voice where I really like admire is that it's like, listen, I'm going to be strong and independent and and if that's the voice, that's like what I'm going to have, right? I don't need to pretend like I'm going to write in like a certain voice just to please you, if you know what I mean.
That's just insane. Where's your trauma poems, like essentially?
But like it's kind of like the same question that you got asked about where your motherhood poem is.
Right.
I mean, it's I think it's on the same level. It's just
absolutely.
Like it's like okay.
It's on page 2. Sorry, it's going to be in the second book. These are the non-trauma poems. Yeah, it's just so bizarre, and I think we get the license to, and we have the right to write about our traumas if we wish to, and when we want to, right? It's going to happen in my own timeline when I'm ready to deal with it, right? And because it is difficult when we do write those poems, and there are poems in the new collection that deal with trauma.
Oh yeah.
And I wasn't ready to write about those moments and those incidences 5, 7 years ago, or even 10 years ago, but I was ready now. And there's certain things even now that I'm like, no, I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready to put that to paper because I'm still processing it. So I think that you got to give folks time they have to be okay with that experience first before they put it onto paper and then share it with the world. That's how I see it. And when I do hear a poem ever from any writer that definitely obviously stems from a traumatic experience, like I don't take that lightly. I take that as a gift and thank you for sharing that vulnerability with me. Like that's how I'm always that's always my initial reaction. It's like, wow, this person is willingly choosing to share this experience with all of us. And, you know, goodness knows like how long they've been holding that in.
How can us, as just human beings, I mean, not even just like person of color, just human beings, how can we not have our own trauma, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so like to actually think that if you're not writing about it, you're not writing about suffering all the time, that you don't have it. It's almost like the weirdest assumption.
Absolutely.
You know, I remember like from your second collection too, like there was a poem where the speaker gently mentioned her childhood, right? It was like 2 lines where you talk about an absent father, the speaker talks about an absent father and an alcoholic mother, you know, and how as an only child, that was very difficult, you know.
Right.
But the whole poem, though, still comes back around of like making that pain into something assured, you know, and that's what I appreciated.
Those 2 lines were the lines that came up in a conversation with my mom. She actually did bring it up.
Oh wow!
And so she says, I didn't like that, and I said, okay, got it, but I still went ahead and published it, and when I wrote this last collection, I went into it very much knowing that I was going to write about my family way more than before, and I was going to start talking about things that we just never talked about, and I was very conscious of that because I was ready to do that. I wasn't ready in the second collection, but I was ready, and by the third. She didn't know that the third book was coming out until it was already out. And she had called me and said, where are you going? And I said, oh, I'm going to go take photos. For what? It's like, oh, I have to take headshots. For what? Well, the book is coming out. Oh, what book? And I said, the third collection came out, Mom. And then she went ahead and bought it that same week. And I never addressed it with her. I never talked to her about it because I just was like, I don't want to get into this conversation because that's the poetry, me being a writer has been a sore subject. And so I didn't want to go there. And so, but she did read it and she did say she enjoyed it, that she enjoyed the collection. And but I didn't go any further than that. I didn't want to say, well, which ones? You know, I didn't want to go into that because there's a lot there about her that is very direct compared to the other collections. Yeah, I know.
But also, it's like your skill as a writer that comes through because I sometimes see difficult subject matters, right? And you see the writer getting lost in the subject matter instead of the writer actually having a handle on it. And that's where I was like, okay, this is masterful because I never felt that I was getting lost in the subject matter itself, you know? It's like I need to be lost in the writing and the telling and the narrative of it, but not just because the subject matter is too difficult, right? Yeah, and I really I love that handle that. So that it was like trusting myself to somebody that I really, you know, like I will fall backwards. Yeah, you know what I mean. And then I'll expect that person to catch me. Yeah. I know you're a huge Wonder Woman fan.
Yes, I do. I do love Wonder Woman, and I love all the iterations of them, but obviously Linda Carter is by far my favorite. She's the original, my favorite. But I love Wonder Woman also not just for what she represents, but actually her backstory. I highly recommend people to read The History of Wonder Woman by Professor Lepore. It's absolutely fascinating how she came to be. It's a very juicy background. It's a very juicy story.
Oh, I love that.
Oh, it is. It's very, I'm not even going to spoil it. People need to go read it, and then you'll know exactly what I mean. The lost episode of Diana Prince, with an epigraph by Nikki Giovanni's poem, The Wonder Woman. But the times require that I give myself willingly and become a Wonder Woman. She has it together. What is wrong with me? I wish I was like her. Phrases like these reverberate from the inner monologue of female audiences sitting on love seats, leaning on boyfriend pillows. Superheroes make it look easy, but she felt fraudulent like a forced smile. Strong women aren't supposed to cry in the shower, letting water and tears merge from the barrage of insecurities as problem solver, healer, defender. Her fans don't know about her passing out in the boots after too much sangria and sleeping pills, or how heavy the crown feels even after she takes it off. The bruises on her wrists from deflecting bullets with gold bracelets, and the calluses left on palms after lassoing lying kingpins instead of believing their apologies anymore. But there are days, oh, there are days, when she wonders about the difference between the words invincible and strong, deciding which one she will be that day.
I love that
Yeah.
so much. I love that.
Thank you.
Ending so much too. But like, I mean, Wonder Woman really does resonate with a lot of people, and also it's part of it is because I feel like the superhero genre is very overrun by white dudes.
Oh yeah,
And yeah, like nowadays, even when I actually look at and all this like cinematic universes that came out, right? Marvel, DC, whatever, and like where do you really see another like enticing superhero character like Wonder Woman?
And also the fact that Linda Carter is Mexican, to have a Latina on the screen to represent this Amazonian princess, right? And just the background and the history of the Amazon women. It's extremely layered. And again, I went down the rabbit hole many years ago wanting to know more about her, and just even the fact that, Miss Magazine had her on the cover, and Miss Magazine actually, Gloria Steinem fought for Wonder Woman to actually get back her lasso, because at one point they had taken her lasso away and they had taken away all her superpowers, and actually, there was a whole movement to give her back her superpowers, and so, and it was a reflection of the times. They really they domesticated Wonder Woman, and she was actually, like more like a housewife, and they had to fight for her to go back to who she was and give her back all the things that made her such a badass. I was like, that's insane. Like, how did the comic book creators, again, who took over, take away all the things that made her who she is, again, which I think is a complete reflection to the way society treats women. So right now, like, I'm just wrestling with a few things. I want to write about my grandfather's bodega. It hit me more than not over the last couple of years that I grew up in a bodega after school. A lot of the kids who have more money, they went to after school programs, they did stuff at the Y or whatever. I went to my grandfather's bodega. Like, my grandmother picked me up and we walked like a couple of miles for like a half hour. We walked to my grandfather's bodega. And I basically was there until my mom got off of work at 5, which meant she didn't get to me till like 5:30, maybe even 6. And I was there for like 3 hours every day for I don't know how many years. So a bodega was my after school program. So yeah, and then I'm sitting with those memories more and more. I mean, I got really chunky because I had all this like junk food near me. There was nobody was charging me. So Snickers, quarter water, Utz, chips, you name it. And then he had an arcade next door. So I literally would just take a bunch of quarters from the cash register and I would go literally just around the corner, and that he owned that area too. And I would play Miss Pac-Man, Centipede, all the games. And I just became, a huge fan of that too. So I spent several years, manning the register and had it, when I'm sitting with those, I'm forcing myself to rethink, to remember all these things. And I want to write them down, because those bodega years now I appreciate them more than ever. At the time I didn't, but I do now. I mean, I did my homework there, and
I can't wait.
Thank you.
Well, and also I want to add that I cannot wait to see the upcoming interviews where you will be the host.
Yes, I get to be on this side.
Yes.
I get to be on this side. I'm super excited. I am super excited. Bridget Bianca is on my list of folks. She already said yes. I'm excited to have her on and just nerd out with her, because she writes about LA a lot, and as she and her and I have that kinship, right? I write about the Bronx, and she writes about LA and what it means to her. And Mike Songson, Mike the poet, he's also slated, and there's a group chat that we're on. I'm Wonder Woman, he's Superman. So that's, and Alan Aquino is Batman. So we call ourselves the Poetic Justice League. Hopefully as well, I'm going to have some poets from the East Coast when they come out to visit. So I'm super jazzed about that.
Oh, I cannot wait.
I know, this is going to be fun. I get to sit over here and do what you do. And it's like, this is way more, over there it looks way more fun.
Oh, does it?
It is. It looks way more fun. So I'm super jazzed.
You're probably gonna make it look a lot easier, and you're gonna shame me. But that's just what I have to deal with.
No,
it's fine.
absolutely. This is all gonna be love. This is all love.